Hello, this is Kyle, also known as AlienTude, and today I am reviewing this $195 katana from Fidestizen. So just a little bit of background, this is a review sample that Fidestizen sent to me. I did not pay for it. I get to keep the katana, but there's no financial incentive for doing this review. If you would like to purchase one of these, I put a link in the description with no tracking codes or affiliate codes, anything like that. Now, if you're not very familiar with Fidestizen, personally, I wouldn't blame you. They have been around for around 10 years, but have never been a big player in the sword reproduction market that I'm aware of. I went into a little bit more detail about them on a previous review, which I will link up here and in the description. So check that out if you want to know more. This is a through-hardened spring steel blade. The listing says that it is made from 60 SMIN steel. Couldn't find a lot about it, but what I did find seems to be that it's pretty similar to 9260. Out of the box, the sword came with a few extras. It came with your bog standard black cotton sword bag, which I don't have because I have over a dozen of them. I chucked it with the rest of them. I don't know which one came with this specific sword. It also came with this little plastic stand here. Normally, I wouldn't use one of these because it feels thin and pretty cheap. But I figure since it came with it, I should use it in this review. It also came with this little kind of informational handout that's pretty much basic maintenance of the katana, like keeping it oiled, that kind of thing, how to sheath and unsheath it, how to be careful because it's very sharp, you know, stuff like that. And I think this in particular tells me a lot about who Fidestizen's target audience is, and it's not seasoned sword collectors. I think their target audience has typically been basically first-time sword buyers, you know, the people who are like, hey, I want a katana, let me go buy one. Those kind of people, not somebody more like me who has, you know, dozens of swords in their collection. So as always, let's start taking a look at the different parts of the katana, starting with the saya. This is a very basic one with just a white glossy lacquer and pretty much no dimension or taper to it. It's just one thickness throughout, which is to be expected at this price point. The lacquer is pretty evenly applied. There's some rippling in it, but there is a little bit of roughness to it right at the Kurigata. Again, kind of what I would expect. The Koiguchi, it looks like it has a horn piece, but this is not horn. You can actually see the paint has slopped over into the wood, showing that it is just wood painted differently rather than an actual horn Koiguchi. Personally, I would prefer they don't make it look fake like this. I would rather just see it all wood or have an actual horn Koiguchi because that is safer for drawing the blade. The fit is overall decent enough. It is a little bit rattly, but not excessively so. And when I hold it upside down, it doesn't fall out. It takes very little effort to draw though, so it's a good fit. The Sageo here is pretty cheap and thin. I've heard Matthew Jensen refer to something like this as shoelace Sageo, and it really does fit. This does feel a lot like a shoelace. So this is probably something, if you were going to buy this and use it regularly, you would probably want to replace the Sageo with something a little bit thicker, more durable. Personally, since I don't really ever wear an obi and wear a katana, I don't need to. I can even leave it in the presentation, not like I have here. Sometimes I take it off, sometimes I don't. Really depends on the sword. Let's get into the nitty-gritty on this review and talk about the Tsuka and Koshirai. The listing says that the Koshirai are made from an alloy. It doesn't say what type. I'm almost positive that means it's a zinc alloy because it is pretty much the cheapest material you can get and still be relatively functional. Unfortunately, zinc alloy tends to mean cheap-looking Koshirai and not durable Koshirai. I would much prefer to see brass, bronze, iron, steel, anything that's more durable. I'm not going to do anything that's really going to push the katana to the limits, but better quality materials implies better attention to detail, better craftsmanship, and more durability. So when I see zinc alloy, it hurts my opinion of the katana some. Now, straight out of the box, the fuchi on this katana was extremely loose. This looseness is entirely too much. You know, if you've watched my katana reviews, you know that budget katanas seem to have a lot of problems with fuchi looseness, and it's something that really bothers me. I've seen enough of it by now that I'm starting to lower my opinion of what is necessary at this price point. Maybe a somewhat loose fuchi is acceptable. However, this one, that's not the case. This is entirely too loose. This is the wrong size Fuchi for the Suka core. And if you want to know what I did about this and just my other thoughts about how things like this can be improved, I did a video on fixing the Fuchi looseness and some other things, and I'll put a link up here and in the description. So the design of the Fuchi is a copy of the Hanwei bamboo mat katana. This is very common in Longchuan, China, where this sword was made. They will copy more successful katana makers, their fittings and such, and then make up molds of them and just reuse the hell out of them. And this Fuchi and the Kashira and the different parts have clearly been made from very well used molds, because the casting quality here is just not good. There's a lot of blotchiness, there's uncleaned parts, the lines waver around. It's just a very low casting quality, and it's something that is just a shame, because in my opinion, when you're talking about a budget katana, this retails for $195, you should go for a simpler design for the Fuchi and Kashira that doesn't need a lot of attention to detail and really high quality castings. Go with just very simple designs that will not suffer from poor casting quality. When you get a lot of details in there, it just starts looking cheap. On top of that, the paint on this Fuchi is very unevenly applied. You can see bits of different colors in there. It's really poorly executed is the best way to put it. And that's all exacerbated by the fact that it is entirely too large for the Suka. Now, because it's so large, obviously there are some pretty prominent ledges here. The best thing I can say about this, though, is that these ledges are not sharp. They were smoothed out enough that even with my hand rests here and I have a bad cut, it doesn't bite into the hand at all. The Kashira is a simpler design, which is good, like I just mentioned, although the casting details here are pretty rough as well. I don't instantly recognize the design like I do with the Fuchi, although it probably is copied from some other maker. The casting, like I said, is pretty rough. Right here on the end, the ridges are very different, are kind of flattened and just really poorly casted. It's less of a problem here because it's a much simpler design, so that's good. But again, it could really use to be improved. Go with an even simpler design. It doesn't need to have really any details. Just a simple black Kashira would be fine with just a little bit of depth to it. You don't need these details for something at this price point, in my opinion, of course. One really good thing I can say is that the Kashira is not loose at all. No wiggle to it at all. That's really good, and that's actually, to me, more important than the Fuchi being loose, because if the Kashira is loose, you can try to use a little bit of like super glue or epoxy or something like that to tighten it up, but it's a lot harder to fix than shimmying the Fuchi. So I'm really glad to see that the Kashira is not loose. There's not really any ledges here at the transition to the Ito, although the Ito does bunch up here quite a bit in a pretty sloppy knot, and that creates a little bit of a bulbous feeling, but it's not uncomfortable, it doesn't bite into the hand. The Ito is actually surprisingly tight, especially when you consider that the knots do not alternate, which means it's not tied entirely properly. I believe this material is cotton because, again, that's going to be the lowest cost material, generally speaking, and it's fraying. In fact, it was fraying right out of the box. I'm kind of concerned about the overall durability of this Ito wrap because it's not done properly. The knots don't alternate. The knot here at the end is just, I don't recognize this exact shape, but it's definitely not typical for a katana. So the fraying, the incorrect tying, I have a feeling that this is not going to last that long. Like I said earlier, the Ito is pretty tight. It's definitely at an acceptable level of tightness for me. The diamonds do kind of wander around a little bit. They're not particularly evenly shaped, but it's not terrible, and it's a functional Ito wrap. I'm just concerned about the durability. Underneath the Ito, the Samigawa is real and pretty low quality. There's a little bit of variation in nodule size, but not a lot. The panels are actually a little too short on both near the Fuchi and the Kashira because I can actually see wood underneath between the Ito and the different Koshirai. So better selection of Samigawa panels would be appreciated. You can tell also they drilled the holes through the Suka-core with the Samegawa on, but they didn't go and clean up the Samegawa. It's kind of roughly shaped around those holes. A minor detail, but something that should be improved. In addition, the Samegawa is not inlaid into the wood, it's just glued on top. It really should be inlaid for better durability and just a better fit and feel for the entire Suka. There's 2 Menuki here, and the best thing I can say about them is they don't bother the hand at all. They're not so large and obtrusive that I notice them when I'm gripping the katana. They are some kind of dragon design, I think. I am absolutely terrible at deciphering Menuki design, and it's exacerbated by the fact that there is a lot of paint on these Menuki. It obscures details. It also obscures a lot of casting flaws, so I can't really tell what the casting quality is here. Now, when I took the katana apart to fix the fuchi looseness, there were quite a few problems. The first thing I noticed is that the Suka-core had a lot of metal shavings and wood shavings in there. And what this tells me is that when they drilled the hole through the Suka-core and through the Nakago, they didn't then take it apart and clean out those shavings. That's just sloppiness and poor attention to detail. Those little bits of metal in there can really chew up the Suka-core, and there's just no reason not to just take it apart, tap it out, and then put it back together. It's a 30-second to 1-minute operation, and it really should be done. It shouldn't increase the cost at all. In addition, the Nakago is rough. There's absolutely no file marks on it, which I'm not expecting at this price point, but the shaping is poor. Every single edge of it is rough. There's a lot of gunk on here. You know, I took a little bit of WD-40 and some old coffee filters that don't fit my coffee machine and just cleaned it up a little bit, and it made a world of difference. In addition, I took a file to the Makugiana, the holes where the Makugi go, and just filed away the burrs on the Makugiana so that it won't chew into the wood any more than it already has. These are, again, little things that the manufacturer can do and should do to really improve the overall fit, the durability, and just the soundness of the construction of the katana. And again, I did a video about this already, so if you want to know more details about it, check out that video. The Tsuba is a very simple design, which I think is based on a chrysanthemum, but I'm not positive on that. This is a very common design also. You'll find it on pretty much every drop-down Longchuan China brand, but it's not a bad thing because, again, simple design on budget katanas is a good thing. Now, this one does have a bit of potential to chew up the hand because when I run my finger along like this, some of these edges are a little sharp. It's not something that bothers me though, because the way I hold a katana, my index finger is usually resting right around the fuchi and not butted up against the Tsuba, so it doesn't bother me. I do think there is some room for improvement on the Tsuba. Not a lot, but maybe raise the rim a little bit, put a little bit more dimension into it, because that kind of thing really elevates a simple design. The Habaki here is pretty much the standard one you'll see from Longchuan, and it doesn't fit very well. In fact, when I disassembled it, a few wooden shims came out from underneath the Habaki. That is certainly better than the epoxy they used on the tactical Wakizashi Ninjato I reviewed from them. But you shouldn't need to shim the Habaki. Longchuan churns out hundreds, thousands of these Habaki. It shouldn't be that hard to find one that fits the blade well enough to not need to shim it. It's just a few extra minutes of time, take a few different Habaki, see which one fits the best. It's something that really should be done because you shouldn't need to shim, you shouldn't need to cut corners when you have a ton of the Habaki on hand. Just take a few moments, find the right one that fits. And it's a better construction overall. And now it's time to talk about the business end, the blade. As always, here's my measurements. So this is a pretty slender blade. It starts at 1 1/4 inch wide and gently tapers down to a little under 9/10 of an inch. It starts at 7.5 millimeters thick, tapering down to 5.1 millimeters at 24 inches at the blade, and then a very slight flare back out to 5.3 millimeters at the yokote. That works out to 28% distal taper, very normal for a katana. Overall, this is a very light blade at just 2 pounds, 2.5 ounces. The blade has pretty much no Niku to it. It's one smooth bevel from the Shinogi-ji all the way to the edge, and that contributes to how lightweight it is. The Bohi also reduces the weight, and it is relatively straight and terminates mostly at the same point. There's a little bit of difference, but not much, and it could be terminated a little bit crisper than it is, but it's not bad. Overall, there's some rippling on the surfaces of the blade, a little bit more in the Bohi, and the most noticeable on the edges of the spine. If I run my fingers along it, I can definitely feel it rippling. It's not egregious, but it's something that could be improved. The polish is kind of what I would consider a soft mirror, in that it is very reflective, but it's not a full-on mirror. I can kind of see my reflection in it, but it's kind of distorted, so it's a soft mirror. That's what I go with. It is through hardened, like I mentioned earlier, so there's no hamon, and I am very, very glad to not see a fake wire brushed hamon on here. You know, the Wakizashi Ninja Toe from Fideszin I reviewed recently did have that, and I just don't like the way it looks. Even though that one had one of the better looking wire brushed hamons, I still prefer no fake hamon if it's through hardened. If it's through hardened, own it. Don't give it a fake hamon. Just, one solid polish is fine. The polish at the Kosaki is a little weird. First off, the Yokote is not geometric, it's purely cosmetic here. But it's a different polish here, but right around the edge, it's a different polish than the rest of the Kosaki. It almost looks like a fake hamon here, even though it's not. It's just an odd, different look. I think what happened here is that when they were finishing off the edge and polishing the edge up some, they slopped over into the Kosaki a little bit and affected the polish. It's purely a cosmetic thing. It doesn't affect the sharpness at all. And the edge overall looks a little toothy to me. When I look at it under light, I can kind of see the light reflecting off it in different ways along the blade, which to me implies it's not really been polished down super smooth, and like I said, a little bit toothy. So with that toothy edge, let's take a look at how it cuts paper. I'm going to start right near where I normally would cut into it. It cut quite smoothly there. As I got a little bit further back, it started tearing a little bit. Not a big deal because I don't really want to cut back here anyways. Let me try that again. Yeah, so it's quite sharp up here. It's biting into the paper, no problem. Let's try that again, starting back here and then drawing through this way. So that went very smooth from back here all the way up into the Kosaki. I want to try just the Kosaki here. Yeah, Kosaki is nicely sharp also. So this is very evenly sharpened throughout the entire blade. Probably gets a little bit duller back here, but you're never going to cut back here anyway, so it doesn't matter. Let's talk about cutting. So I did water bottles with this sword. I did not do pool noodles or tatami because my tatami stand is pretty much destroyed at this point, and I currently have a new one in the works, but it's not done yet. So just water bottles. Well, this sword cuts water bottles beautifully, and I was able to get a good number of silent cuts, more than I'm accustomed to. The slightly toothy edge did not detract from the cutting at all. The sword is balanced at 4.5 inches, and that gave it the perfect amount of authority in the cut, and the light weight makes it very easy to maneuver around while doing cuts. Now I want to talk about the handling characteristics and do some comparisons with other katanas. So as I noted earlier, this is a very light blade at 2 pounds and I believe it was 4 ounces. Just very light for a katana. You would typically see them more around 2.5 to up to 3 pounds or so. Obviously there's a wide range they can be. This one is definitely on the lower end of the equation. And that makes for a blade that is very easy to move around, very easy to cut with, and have very good control over it at all times. And the other thing is, yeah, feels good one-handed also, without really any strain on the arm or anything. Feels very good one-handed, which is not really a surprise. 2 pounds, 4 ounces is not heavy for a one-handed sword at all. In fact, a lot of, for instance, European arming swords are going to be more around 2.5 pounds. So this is light even for that. So with such a light blade, it's actually surprising that it still feels like it has a good amount of authority in the cut. Now it's balanced around 4.5 inches from the Mune Mache, right around there. And that's far enough out that it, like I said, it has good authority in the cut without feeling point heavy. It definitely has some presence out there. I can feel the tip out there, but I can also accelerate the tip very quickly. And I doubt you are going to hear that, but I do get good tachikaze with this. So this is actually a very fun katana to move around, to practice with, and to test your edge alignment, since it is a pretty loud blade in the tachikaze. And that just makes it a fun sword to use. The Tsuka shaping is pretty good also. I really like how it starts a little bit wider up here and tapers down to the Kashira just a little bit. It's not a lot, but that little bit of extra dimension does make it feel just a little bit better in the hand. And it's something that a lot of katana don't do. Oftentimes they are just going to be completely straight across. And it's not that that's a bad design. It's just that adding a little bit of extra attention to detail there helps improve the overall feel. I will say I'm also kind of surprised that the Ito wrap is still pretty tight even after cutting with it, because it's not alternating knots like it should be. It gives me some concern about the durability, but so far it's been very good. So here we have the Fidestin katana and the Romance of Min Yuri Jigoku. These are pretty similar blades. They're both through hardened. They're in roughly the same price. This is $195, this was $150. The big difference though is that the Yuri Jigoku is a Anakubi Zukuri geometry, whereas the Fidestin is a Shinogi Zukuri with a bohi. Now it's notable that Anakubi Zukuri is typically going to be a lighter blade. It's got the spine that is narrowed considerably, and it's got a bohi and a sohi on it. So generally speaking, a Anakubi Zukuri blade geometry is going to be a very light cutter. These in hand feel almost identical. It's actually surprising how similar they feel. I'm going to cut in here and note that they actually weigh exactly the same, 975 grams or 2 pounds, 2.4 ounces. Quite a coincidence, but it does explain why they feel so similar. The Fidestin is balanced a little bit further out than the Yuri Jigoku. This is at about 4.5 inches. This one feels more like about 3.5 to 4 inches. But they have a very similar feel. And if I pick up just the Yuri Jigoku, it feels just like, Anakubi Zukuri are one of my favorite geometries just because they're so light and nimble. But this one feels just so easy to move around. And I don't know if you're hearing that, it does have some tachikaze to it. But when I pick up the Fidestin, it has a little bit more blade presence, which you'd expect since it is not Anakubi, it has the full spine on it. But it's just so light and nimble and easy to move around while still having authority in the cut. It's a really interesting blend between more traditional geometry of Shinogi Zukuri, but still maintaining the light cutting of a Anakubi. And for another comparison, here's the Fidestin, and this is the Yari no Hanzo Musashi, which is roughly 150 euros. It's a little bit different because you have to pay extra for sharpening. These, again, feel very similar, actually. They They are both Shinogi Zukuri, and they both have a bohi. If you look at them right here, the Fideszin definitely has more sori to it, definitely a different amount of sori. The Yari no Hanzo gets a little bit more narrow up near the tip, but they feel pretty similar. The Musashi, I think, has a little bit more blade presence. I think it's probably stays a little bit thicker out here. It makes some good tachikaze and just feels great. The Ito is a little rougher on my hands than the Fideszin, which is interesting because I really do enjoy the Musashi. I'm actually surprised at how nice the Ito on this Fideszin feels. I'm a little concerned because it's cotton, I'm pretty sure, and it's already fraying a decent amount. And then the knots don't alternate, so I'm not so sure how the long-term durability will be. But it feels great in the hands right now, that's for sure. Let's go over the top 3 things that I think could and should be fixed to improve this katana. First off is the koshirai fit. You know, Longchuan produces a ton of habaki, fuchi, kashira, all the different parts. And there's no excuse for picking poor fitting parts. The fuchi was just way too large for this Tsukakore. The habaki needed to be shimmed. These kind of things should not happen. Take a few extra moments during the construction, find things that fit properly, and put it together. It shouldn't just be reach into a bin, grab parts, put it on, and if it doesn't work well, who cares, it's done. You know, just a little bit more attention to detail is going to go a long way. Secondly is the Ito wrap. While it was tight, and it still is, and it's effective, it was fraying right out of the box. The knots don't alternate, and the knot here at the end is just an odd shape. A little bit more attention to detail, a little bit more proper wrapping, and this is going to be a much more effective and more durable Ito wrap. Lastly is the Nakago. This is pretty much repetitive of what I've been saying. A little bit more attention to detail, a little more care taken with the katana. Take it apart after drilling the holes, clean up the burrs on the holes, you know, just clean up the Nakago some. I shouldn't need to do that myself. Just a little bit of attention to detail, a little bit more effort. You know, I'm guessing this would add maybe like an hour to the construction of this katana, all told, would make this just a better overall sword. So we're not talking a big time commitment here. We're talking little things that take very little time that will make an overall better sword. And now it's time to talk bottom line. This sword retails for $195. Is it worth that price? Well, it's a very similar offering to the Romance of Min Yuri Jigoku, which I compared it to a moment ago, and it has some things that are better about it, such as the fact that it uses real Saimegawa, but some things that are worse about it, such as the terribly loose fuchi. You know, this is not a bad katana. The blade is actually quite good. It's just let down by the mounting, which unfortunately is pretty common in budget katana. So comparing it again to the Yuri Jigoku, that one sold for $150. I think it was a little bit better of a katana, and I didn't think it was quite worth it. So since this one's a little bit more expensive, a little bit worse, I don't really think I can say this is worth it. However, it's not far off. You know, just like Romance of Min, there's a lot of stuff that could be improved, but they're not big things that are going to be difficult to improve. They're just attention to detail, quality control. They already have the blade down pretty much. The blades are good. They just need to put a little more attention into the mounting, and the sword's going to be quite a usable sword and quite good value. I'm hopeful that Fideszin can get there. You know, I've said before on my previous review, and I can confirm on this one again, they take feedback incredibly well and are very gracious about admitting that they don't have everything sorted out yet, but they want to get it there. They want to improve and make these swords appealing to sword collectors, not just the first-time sword buyers. So I'm very hopeful that they will get there. They will put the work in to have their people in China put a little bit more effort into it and a little bit more quality control and improve the entire thing. I think they have a good chance to do it because they have the right attitude, but unfortunately they're not quite there yet. And that's going to wrap up this review. Thank you for watching. If you haven't, please hit the like button and subscribe. Check out the rest of my reviews. I have over 70 of them on my channel, ranging from a variety of katana and European swords, even some Indian swords, a whole bunch of reviews. Check them out, and until next time, Alien 2'd out.